Kayla, you can sit, all right? We're not going to rehash this. My father didn't even acknowledge my presence. He just kept going through that stupid folder, as if whatever was in there was more crucial than I was to him. My mother was over by the window with her arms crossed, agreeing with every heartless word he spoke. I was starting to sweat, but I didn't budge. "Dad," I started, my voice faltered. "I'm your daughter." Grandma raised me like I was her own child. She made that obvious every year on my birthday in every letter and every phone call. He finally glanced up at me. "You are not my daughter," he said, his voice completely flat, as though he was just informing me about the weather. "We only let you stay here because your mom wanted you to." Then Mom said something that cut through the air like a knife, though it was said quietly. "Only people related by blood get the family money, Kayla." I just stood there staring at them. It felt like someone was tightening a noose around my chest. I then asked the one question I could think of, my voice more composed than I thought it would be. "Will you still feel this way after tomorrow?" They didn't even pause. Dad just shrugged. "Yup, that's not going to change." Mom didn't even flinch. He didn't have any clue what was coming because tomorrow wouldn't just be any other day. Tomorrow was the day the reading of Grandma's will would take place. And for the last 5 years, I had been guarding a secret so profound, so carefully hidden away with silence and humility, that they never even took the time to wonder what I did with my life. That secret, it was going to turn everything upside down. I want to pause for a second to give you a glimpse into a specific moment, not with a lengthy explanation or a tale of woe, but with a singular experience. 4 years prior, when I was just 19, I was standing outside of a courtroom after I had testified against the person who tried to harm my grandmother. My entire family had declined to attend. They told me that it was pointless and that she wouldn't be around much longer anyway. I was by her side, clutching her hand, and I heard her softly say something that no other person had ever been told. "You're the person I trust, Kayla. Not because of our family connection, but because of your heart." I've never forgotten that. In the subsequent years, I crafted a life that no one expected. During the daytime, I sorted books in a bookstore to cover my rent. At night, I managed a consulting business under a different alias, unassuming, anonymous, yet influential. By the time I was 23, I had clients spanning from Europe to Singapore. When I was 24, I had saved enough money to pursue a larger ambition, something that would demonstrate that love, faithfulness, and honesty were far more valuable than familial connections. Now, let's return to that day, the day before everything fell apart for them. My parents had already begun their celebrations. "Just make sure you dress appropriately tomorrow," my mom said from across the room. "The lawyers will be there. The media might also be there." "For what?" I asked with a small smile. "Are you expecting a fancy ceremony?" she replied with a dismissive laugh. "We're inheriting $10 million, Kayla." "This isn't a bargain shop." I almost started laughing, not because it was humorous, but because they were so oblivious. That guy was so full of himself. Dad mumbled something under his breath about a genuine family and what would remain when they were gone, and I just stood there, like I was frozen. They seemed to believe I was the one who was getting the short end of the stick. But the reality, they'd already lost the war. They just weren't aware of it yet. That evening, I found myself alone in my small apartment. It was cramped and chilly, and it had no TV. Just a single lamp, a cheap, worn-out couch. But that little room had seen every drop of tears, every idea. Night after night, I stayed up, working on my plans. I opened the secured drawer in my desk, took out the envelope. It was discolored from age, but its contents were spotless. It held Grandma's handwriting. It was graceful, precise, and without a doubt her penmanship. She gave it to me at the hospital a few months before she died. She said it was only for me and to wait to open it until the will was read. I looked at it then like it was a dangerous explosive. Because the next day, that letter was going to shock them, and I wouldn't even blink. The reading of the will took place in a fancy, stone-walled office in the city. It was the kind of place where quietness was a commodity. There were mahogany desks and frosted glass doors. The receptionist didn't even offer a smile. I went inside, still wearing the same black coat I wore to Grandma's funeral, nothing flashy. Just simple, quiet. Dad had his Rolex on. Mom was wearing fake pearls but acted as if they were real. And at the head of the table was Mr. Hammond, the estate's lawyer. He was tall. Severe, no messing around. Everyone else was already sitting. My uncle, my aunt, and their spoiled son, the same boy who once torched my homework and called it a joke. Everyone stared at me as if I were a stray who'd crashed a fancy event. Uncle Martin spoke with a forced grin. "I wasn't anticipating your presence here," he remarked. I returned the gesture with a strained smile. "How amusing." "Grandma invited me," I said, then nothing. Mr. Hammond then cleared his throat. "We've gathered for the official reading of Edith Langford's will," he stated. "Before we start, Miss Kayla, your grandmother asked that you read a letter she prepared for you." Aloud. In this room, my dad stammered, his eyes wide. "What letter?" However, I was already taking the letter from my coat, my hands shaking but my voice firm. I unfolded the note and started to read. "My dearest Kayla, if they're already judging you like you don't fit in, just let them. This space isn't filled with family. It's occupied by people who came for money. But you, my dear, were the only one who stayed with me when I was struggling, when I was vulnerable, when I was having difficulty. They said you weren't related by blood, but I considered you family. You showed me the meaning of unconditional love. And so I'm revealing to you the meaning of faith. They thought they were getting something. They won't. Because I'm giving everything to the person who showed me the meaning of true riches. It's all yours, Kayla, the company. The properties, the savings, the heritage. I know you won't use it to harm them, but to mend what they chose to destroy. Make me pleased, with all my affection." Grandma, the quietness in that space wasn't empty. It was like a storm getting ready to erupt. My dad's fists tightened. My mom's mouth fell open. Uncle Martin actually chuckled, but then he understood it wasn't funny. And Mr. Hammond, he produced another folder which had my name on it in gold lettering. He said, looking around the room, "Effective immediately, Kayla Langford is the only person to inherit Edith Langford's assets. That covers the 3 homes in Aspen, Napa, and Maine. It encompasses the stocks, totaling just over $8 million. It also includes the Langford Publishing Company and the rest of her investments, which add up to a total estate value of $12.7 million. He glanced at my father. He then replied, "Yes, she ensured Kayla's right to inheritance was confirmed by legal guardianship and specific instructions. There's no room for doubt." I didn't make eye contact. I just stood there, gave Mr. Hammond a polite nod, and started to walk out. However, right before I got to the door, I stopped, turned around, and said softly, "You were right, Dad. I'm not your real daughter, but I am the true inheritance." "You can't do this," Dad's voice broke behind me as I began to walk away. I didn't answer him, not because I was speechless, but because I didn't feel the need to speak. Allowing the silence to hang between us was more powerful than anything I could possibly say. But then I heard it. My mom's voice, high-pitched and shaking with fear. "We raised you. We gave you food, clothes, and a home." I turned around with my hand still holding the smooth chrome door handle. "You made it clear to me always that I was an outsider," I responded softly. "And now you have at long last achieved what you wanted." I walked into the law firm's corridor, my pulse thrumming. However, it wasn't because I was scared. It was from the unbelievable reality of what had transpired. $12.7 million. The publishing company, 3 properties, a dynasty that had lasted for a long time, a reputation built on perseverance. Ink and long nights of work. It was all mine, but the money wasn't the point. That wasn't what it had ever been about. This was about something more profound, more rooted in time, and more intimately linked to me. This was about being stifled for many years, being told I wasn't good enough, that I was secondary, that I should consider myself fortunate to be included at all. Now I fully control the whole blasted thing. As I exited the building, the chilling air struck me like a cleansing. Sharp, tangible, vibrant. I took my phone out and made a single call. "Gabriel, it's time." A moment of silence from the other person. "Then you want the documents written up?" I inhaled slowly. "Send over the transfer request for the change in the board. It's active immediately. I want complete command. And Gabriel, prepare the announcement for the media. The one called Granddaughter remakes the Langford legacy." "No," I smirked, watching myself in the reflection of a passing vehicle. "Call it, Estranged Heiress Speaks Out and Acquires Everything." Back at my place, or the place that had seen more hardship than triumph, I didn't even sit. I began the process of packing up my belongings. I wouldn't be needing that square footage anymore. The broken mirror in the bathroom, the stove that sputtered when turned on, and the window that always let the cold air seep in during the cold nights were things I wouldn't be using. This place had been a sanctuary of sorts for me. Now it was time to finally move on. Nonetheless, I couldn't stop myself from taking one last look before I left. I made my way toward the wall, where a worn picture of my grandma and me was hanging, slightly askew. The edges of the picture were showing somewhere. She was holding my hand in the photo. I must have been around 8 years old with a missing front tooth and a huge grin on my face. I touched my fingers to the glass. "Thank you," I quietly said. After that, I departed. The following 2 days seemed to speed by like a storm. The moment the news got out, everything went crazy. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. I was receiving calls from reporters, board members, and distant relatives who had previously made fun of me during holiday gatherings. Now, out of nowhere, they all wanted to chat. But the most surprising thing was my dad showing up at my new office without being invited. I was seated in Grandma's old chair, which was now mine, when my assistant informed me of his presence. "There's a man waiting. He says he's your father. He won't go until he's spoken with you." I should have declined. But a part of me, perhaps because I was curious or possibly wanting some closure, said yes. He walked into the office looking like he had been through a lot. There was no arrogance, no fancy watch. Instead, he was wearing a wrinkled dress shirt, and his face was white, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. "You're the one who did this." He didn't sit down. He just stood there like someone who had seen a ghost. "No," I slowly responded. "She did." I simply followed what she wanted. He tried to laugh, but it came out sounding like a sob. "Do you believe wealth makes you superior to me?" I got up, circled his desk, and faced the guy who once said I'd never achieve anything. "No," I murmured, "but compassion does." He seemed surprised. I got closer. "And you picked being mean." I figured that would be my final interaction with him. However, suffering has a weird tendency to resurface. I got a letter a week later. It was written by hand. From my mother. I almost tossed it. However, something made me open it. It was about Kayla. "I know we weren't nice to you. I'm aware we said things that can't be taken back, but your father's unwell. He's been drinking. We lost the home. I don't know where we'll go. I'm not anticipating your forgiveness. But if there's a trace of the girl who used to embrace us, please assist." I scrutinized the letter for a while, then I grabbed my jacket. And I drove. Their home, which was once impressive, filled with pride and artwork, was now a wreck. The lights were out. The front step groaned beneath my weight. When the door opened, I nearly didn't recognize my mom. She appeared a decade older. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were bloodshot. My dad was on the sofa, focused on the floor. A bottle was in his grasp. I said nothing. I just put an envelope on the table. Mom picked it up, her hands trembling. Inside, a lease agreement, already paid for. For half a year, contact information for a therapist for my dad, and a short message. "I can't forget your behavior, but I can select the person I want to be. I'm not like you. Therefore, I'm helping because that's what my grandma would have wanted me to do." I departed before anyone could say a thing, not expecting any praise. Not because I wanted them to thank me, but because it was the correct course of action. The following morning, I was perched on the roof of Langford Publishing's main building. The city spread out beneath me. It was bustling, tough, and full of life. And I remembered every instance where they tried to crush my spirit. Each time they insulted me, and when I was told I wasn't good enough. So then I said to the wind, "You were mistaken," because I was more than enough. I was completely undefeatable. After I left that package, I didn't receive anything from them for several weeks. No expressions of thanks, no apologies. Just nothing. However, I didn't require it. I had more important things to focus on. Now my grandma's publishing house belonged to me, and I intended to revive it. Not just to honor the past, but for folks like me who had been muted for too long. 3 days later, I walked into the meeting room with a sense of assurance. The very same men who had once mocked me stood up as I walked in. "Miss Langford." One of them acknowledged me with a nod. "Kayla," I corrected. "Let's start." I presented a complete overhaul. Fair compensation, new leaders, promising individuals, and financial support for young writers from disadvantaged backgrounds. They resisted. I persisted, and at the conclusion of that meeting, they approved it. Everyone agreed. That night, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in ages. It was Noah, my old friend from my youth. He was the only person who always had faith in me when no one else did. He saw the news. "You succeeded, Kay." I felt a wave of pride wash over me, and I smiled. It felt like a far greater reward than any money could have ever provided. Just when I thought everything was going to be peaceful, something completely unforeseen occurred. The hospital called. My father had passed out. His liver wasn't working anymore. My mom was hysterical. She was crying, and I didn't know what to do to help. "He wants to see you." I gazed at the phone. Then I made my way over to the hospital. I wasn't going because I had forgiven them. It was because I wouldn't permit their negativity to shape who I was. Inside his room, he appeared frail. He looked exhausted. He attempted to speak, but he started coughing. I simply stayed seated. I felt no anger and I showed no affection. I just remained quiet. "I was mistaken," he croaked out. I gave a slight nod. That was all that was required. As I was getting ready to depart, Mom grabbed my hand. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. I met her gaze. "Because I'm not like you," I stated. "And I never intend to be." The days went by and things began to improve for me. My company was prospering with me in charge. My ideas were taking form. The board, who had doubted me previously, were now applauding my choices. Every obstacle I faced seemed to invigorate the passion within me. I had proved that I wasn't simply the outcast. I was now a woman who had control of her own future. Despite all the triumphs I was achieving, one thing remained constant: the burden of my family's disapproval. Dad was frequently admitted to the hospital, and Mom contacted me less often. It wasn't a feeling of guilt, it was something different, an odd sense of quiet satisfaction. They knew they had pushed me away for good. I actually felt fine with things as they were for once. Then, one day, while finishing up a new agreement, there was a rap on my office door. It was Uncle Martin. He was there and he seemed like he'd just tasted something awful. "Kayla," he began, speaking quietly, "I'm here to say I'm sorry. For everything, we were all mistaken." I had no idea what to say. I just couldn't muster up any more apologies. "You've made your point," he went on, his eyes pleading for me to forgive him. "Could we, at the very least, discuss moving forward, about repairing our relationship?" I just looked at him, his words floating like vapor. "There's nothing to rebuild with you," I responded quietly. "Not anymore." I don't believe he anticipated that, but I wasn't willing to waste any more time explaining myself to those who never truly understood me. The following day, the news broke. The story of my success, the headline, "Strange Heiress Seizes Langford's Inheritance," and the entire world was watching. I'd shown them all, my father, my mother, my uncle, the whole world. But the ensuing events weren't the victorious moments I had envisioned. One night, I received a phone call from the attorney who handled Grandma's estate. "Kayla," he said, "there's something you have to see." I went into his office and he gave me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter from Grandma. "My dearest Kayla," she wrote, "I have left you more than words can express. Please know that my love for you is paramount. But there's one additional thing you absolutely have to know before it's too late." My pulse was pounding as I finished the document. The reality was right there in front of me, and it was far more surprising than I anticipated. Grandma's letter wasn't merely a farewell message. It was an explosion of news. "My sweet Kayla, I'm aware of your actions. I understand how far you've progressed, but I've left something much more crucial for you to uncover. It's time to take back what is truly yours. Not simply the inheritance, not just the family title, but the genuine facts." I felt the space around me shrink. My fingers trembled as I continued to read. It wasn't just the property she had given to me. She had given me something far more significant, something intimate, a final present capable of wrecking everything my parents believed. The attorney observed me closely as I digested the information. "Would you like assistance in locating it?" he asked kindly. I gave a slight nod. That evening I was in Grandma's old house's attic. The property my father had sold off ages ago. The spot I'd spent summers, always near her, listening to her tales. Now it was just an abandoned structure, although not everything had disappeared. I opened an old, dusty trunk and found it within, concealed beneath old books and forgotten breath mints. It was a box, a tiny wooden box with a lock. My heart sped up as I unlocked it. Inside were a variety of letters, legal papers, and pictures. One letter grabbed my attention particularly. "Kayla, my darling, I made a promise to you." This letter concludes the whole thing, the thing that puts it all together. Everything my parents ever said about my origins was completely false. The man they told me was my father isn't actually him. My heritage, my inheritance, everything was hidden from me, and I'll never forget it. But I kept this safe for you. Now the decision is entirely up to you. You can face them, or you can utilize this gift and decide what to do with it. Either way, you have the control now. I was completely shocked just sitting there. The documents in my hands weren't just family secrets. They revealed a life I had no idea existed. My actual father was a person I had never even heard the name of. And there was more. There was a legal will from my grandmother explaining she'd officially adopted me when I was 5 years old. I wasn't just Edith Langford's granddaughter. I was legally and definitively her daughter. I knew exactly what needed to happen. The following day, I was at my office, holding the papers in front of me. I called my parents and they came quickly. I had the advantage now. The truth was in my hands. As they walked into my office, they weren't expecting me to confront them with the truth. I presented everything to them. I said as I pushed the papers toward them here. "I'm not just your daughter, Dad. I am your inheritance. And I am legally your mother's daughter, not just her granddaughter. You thought you could get rid of me, that I wasn't worth the struggle. But now all you can do is deal with the outcome." Dad looked at the papers, his face lost color, his lips were completely parched. "You have no clue about the fallout from your actions," he murmured, but his words lacked conviction. "I know exactly what's happened," I replied without warmth, "and I'm not regretting it." I was standing right in front of the two of them. "This is the conclusion of your story," I thought. "You never considered me one of your own, but I will never disregard what I have gained." I indicated towards the structure, the life that I had created, and I said that this is how I'm using what you discarded. And at that precise moment, I was finished with it all. I was no longer filled with rage. I felt no need for retribution. I wasn't even feeling down. I had reclaimed everything that they had attempted to steal from me. I had become confident enough to speak my mind. The ensuing weeks were not the easiest. There were inquiries in public, and the press was all over me. However, truthfully, I wasn't bothered. Although the family that I had been hopping for had vanished, I had everything necessary to go on, and I was handling it all myself. I was now the maker of my own destiny. I was my own individual. As I gazed at the metropolis from my office window, I finally grasped what my grandma had been trying to impart to me. It doesn't depend on genetics. It's about love, faithfulness, and courage, and I possessed every one of those qualities.